Why not Frank Gore? Up the middle with a cut. Frank Gore breaks the tackle. Inside the 10. Gore! Touchdown!
McCall loading up deep. Got a man. Foot race. Touchdown. Coastal Carolina.
Pressure comes. Watson throws as he got hit. And it's caught. What a catch. Off to the races. Rajay Johnson. Touchdown.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the OFN Today on the Ourlads Football Network as we get the opportunity to talk Sun Belt Conference football in our very first installment of previewing college football FBS conferences. And for the first time on our network, we also have the opportunity of speaking to Dusty Thibodeaux of Warhawk Report. Now, you're with Rivals, Dusty?
I am. Been with Rivals coming up 20 years, man. Time flies when you're having fun.
20 years. Wow. That's awesome. How long has Rivals been around?
I think we started in the .com era of the late 90s there. So not too far into it. Started off as a good old independent and then got acquired by Rivals or invited into the network. So been a part of it ever since and enjoyed my time there with Rivals, Yahoo Sports, and the whole mix that they've kind of thrown at me.
Well, then it sounds like I've got the right guy to talk about Sun Belt Conference football. Now, besides, of course, being with Warhawk, one of the reasons I wanted you on is because I wanted to talk about the league. And that's because you, along with Jeremy Harper and Shane Metlin, you guys have something called the Fun Belt Podcast. And obviously, that's about Sun Belt football. Is that all Sun Belt football or Sun Belt sports?
All Sun Belt sports. I mean, obviously focusing on the big, I guess, in the Sun Belt, football, men's, women's basketball. We're a baseball league first and foremost, and then obviously also softball. But we've really branched out. If it's in the good old Fun Belt, we try to cover it, talk about it, and give fans a chance to learn more about the league that is really, in our opinion, the best G5 out there.
It's been incredible, and more than anybody the rise of the conference in just the last several seasons. It's just no other conference has gone through such a rise and in a positive direction. So it's great to see, and that's why I'm sure, I don't know what your viewership is like, but at this time of the year, I would assume it's gotten bigger each year. More and more people probably want to know what's going on in the Sun Belt and how come there's so many. How come these teams now can actually not just surprise every once in a few years with one of those matchups against Power 5 schools, but actually, depending on the team, it's going to be a battle, and it's really been fun to watch.
It is. I mean, you look just at last year where you had in one weekend Georgia Southern under first-year head coach Clay Helton going to Nebraska, getting a win.
I had that one. I picked that one. Yep.
Earlier in the day, you had Marshall going to Touchdown Jesus and getting the big win there at Notre Dame.
Had that one too.
And Bryce Chase and his Mountaineers going to College Station, getting the win over a top 10 ranked Texas A&M Aggie team. It was a phenomenal, just that one weekend.
Yes, that was incredible. And if anything, could have proven the strength of this conference. That was definitely it. All right. So first of all, let's talk a little bit more about the background. So again, Warhawk Report. So is your primary focus covering Louisiana Monroe?
That is the primary focus. My alma mater is a school that, I try to give back to by giving them a little TLC. The newspapers are dying, so really the online media is the only thing that a lot of the smaller schools have in order to really give themselves a presence out there on the internet, as well as a media presence overall. So try to do some coverage there of team and recruiting as well. And, just give back that way. Warhawk Report, like I said, the first and foremost of my loves. Close second, though, of course, is the Fun Belt Podcast, where we cover all the Sun Belt Conference, and that's really all the way from Texas State all the way to Old Dominion and everything in between.
And Jeremy, again, who's on the podcast, he covers Arkansas State football for Howlraiser. And by the way, I'm going to have links in the description for all these websites and everywhere you can check these guys out, Twitter, all that. And Shane Metlin covers James Madison for the Daily News Record. So right now, does he have bragging rights, James Madison, between the three of you?
No, not at all. We keep everybody grounded.
Okay.
We always throw jabs at each other. I, of course, am on the receiving end more so out of ULM after 3 straight 4-8 seasons. It's not good times for the Warhawks, but I take it in stride and try to dish it right back to them. And knowing that I'll at least get to play Arkansas State as a divisional rival. We haven't yet to make that cross trip to play James Madison, but when we do, the gloves will be put on between me and Shane.
So how was Media Day? You just got back, right?
We did. We just got back from Sunbelt Media Days down in New Orleans. Fantastic. I think the one common thing that we can really take away from it that we've seen across all the teams is going to be offensive line play. Everyone is worried about what they have. Do they have enough not only to even just throw out that initial 5, but then what do they have behind that?
Okay.
A lot of teams say they have a good center, but maybe no guards or tackles. Maybe they have a tackle and a guard, but no center or anything on the other side. So it's a real mix, and it's going to be interesting to see how does that kind of shake out and how does that affect the great quarterbacks, running backs, and everything else that we have in this league. Because obviously, no matter how good your backfield is, if you have nobody up front blocking for you, you're not going to get to showcase that talent.
So did your mind change much going into Media Day and then coming out regarding who you think will be the teams to beat?
I think so. I mean, the preseason poll came out that is voted on by the coaches, probably actually the sports information directors by, proxying for their coach. But they had James Madison on the East winning it. I don't think that it's going to be James Madison as the top dog in the East. I really think that's a two-man show between Appalachian State making a rebound statement after that disappointing year last year, or Marshall, the Thundering Herd, really getting things put together. They have a new quarterback there in Cam Fancher really taking over full-time at quarterback. And so I think that in the East, that's what it is. In the West, going into it, we knew that it was going to be a two-man show of South Alabama and Troy. On our show, we picked South Alabama almost unanimously to be the team to beat in the West. However, the Jags have always burned us, and we all have heartbreak. I don't know if I can if I can just scream from the mountaintops that it's the Jags, but I love Kane Womack, the head coach there for the Jags. Carter Bradley. It's a stacked, talented team. There's no reason they shouldn't win. But based on the history, I'm still kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door of really preparing the Jags as the Western team.
Okay. As far as teams that you think, and again, same thing coming out of there, was there a team that you thought was going to be better, and then for some reason you came out of the media days thinking, I don't know, maybe they're going to have some problems this year?
I think ODU, Old Dominion, is really that team. They're really a mystery because, we talked about ULM not really having much of a presence. Old Dominion has no presence, it seems like, of who covers them. So finding information out is really kind of far and few between. But talking with head coach Ricky Ronnie, Jason Henderson, their all-conference preseason defensive player of the year linebacker, I still just don't have a good feel of what this team is going to be like. Maybe they're a 12-0 team. Maybe they're an 0-12 team. Probably somewhere in between, realistically, but no real good feeling of how exactly this season is going to go for the Monarchs.
I am keeping my fingers crossed because I put a request out, my very first request for a player interview for this month, and it looks good. I'm not going to jinx it, but I am really high, higher than probably 95% of the scouts I hear, on Grayson McCall. I watch him play, and I just look at the plays he makes, and under pressure in big spots, always needing the big first down, the big scoring drive, and he just has it. And that's just something you cannot teach. You can say all you want about arm strength or size or this competition or this or that. There's something about this kid that I just feel real good about at the next level.
In the words of the voice of the Shants, Joe Cashion, QB1. He doesn't even give him a name. He's just QB1. You know, it was great for the league that he returned to Coastal Carolina to keep kind of that QB stardom that we have in the league. But it was an interesting conversation because he was a guy that entered the transfer portal when Jamie Chadwell left Coastal to go to Liberty. And, you know, I told him straight up, I said, outside looking in, he was transferring to Liberty.
Yeah.
You know, following coach, they have a great relationship. We see what they've done together. So they're going to go off together. Fantastic. And talking with Grayson McCall, he was like, yeah, I get that. And it would have been fun to go with him. But talking with Tim Beck, seeing the quarterbacks that he's worked with, most recently, you know, Joe Burrow and several of the other, CJ Stroud, that he wanted to kind of show that he's not a system quarterback, that he's a good collegiate quarterback and has what it takes to really carry this team. So he said that was a big motivator for him to actually come back to Coastal Carolina for this 5th season. You know, I jokingly said when I introduced him on our podcast, the 10-time player of the year, he's already won it, I think, 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's his for the losing.
Yeah.
And so I think that his star power there, his play is that ahead of itself, that you're right. He'll be missed after this year, but we need to sit back and kind of enjoy this last season we have with QB1.
Have you, with all the years of especially the last several years as the programs have really risen up the ranks, is there another player that you can say that, yeah, you know what, Grayson's awesome, but this guy is maybe just a little bit better? Or would you put Grayson at the top of the players that you've watched, or, like I said, maybe just over the last 5 or 6 years?
Over the past 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
he's probably the best one that we've seen in all time of Sun Belt Conference football, without a doubt. T.Y. Hilton, that guy, it wasn't fair. I mean, he was the Bo Jackson on the old Technical type of player.
Yeah.
That it just wasn't fair watching him out there on the field. He was always open. He was always way downfield and always in the end zone.
That's a good one. All right, Dusty. So still have what we're going to cover here mostly, and we're going to get to that in a little bit, go over the teams, go over some of the teams and some of the key players to keep an eye on. So before we do that, a couple other things. Transfer portal. We just talked about McCall. Did the conference lose more players than you thought, or not so much? Do you think they retained more players than you thought?
Yeah, I know that personally ULM lost a lot of players in the transfer portal. I think a lot of the key players there, the Old Dominion we had talked about, went in the transfer portal. And so that's adding to the question marks that you have about the Monarchs as well. But I think for the most part, a lot of the Sun Belt teams kind of held on to what they had.
Okay.
And maybe even gained a little bit. I know that ULM gained a Miami running back, Thaddeus Franklin Jr., that's going to be a difference maker. In addition to that, getting an Ole Miss fullback, Isaiah Woolard, that's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the backfield and kind of give you that additional offensive threat to allow new quarterback Jaira Wright to really have a chance to showcase what he can do, whether that offensive line is ready or not. He'll have that additional blocker in the backfield.
Now, I think some people would think, all right, when you're talking about how the transfer portal works, when you get to the group of 5, you would think, all right, well, where are they getting their players? Are they getting their players from top-end FCS schools, or are they getting their most of their players from guys that are playing a group of 5 or even Power 5 that feel like that there's no room to advance? I'm stuck here 2nd or 3rd or 4th on the depth chart, but I want to go start. And if I'm going to do that, I'm going to go make the switch to the Sun Belt. Where do you see most of these guys coming from?
think it's honestly yes, all the above. It's a mix. You're going to get the guys that, of course, were maybe over recruited is such a term, that they wound up at the Alabamas, the LSU's, whatever, and they're not going to see the field there, just because they're not true SEC caliber of players. However, they're standout players in the G5, in particular in the Sun Belt.
Yeah.
So they get a chance to go down and really showcase what they can do to get the NFL scout attention, XFL, USFL, whatever, but to be able to continue playing at the next level. I think also you'll see guys that were under recruited, i.e., their high school coach just didn't really showcase them enough. They didn't have enough film. I think we still see maybe some residual of the COVID effect of, guys just not being able to really get their name out there from going to camps and such, that you're going to see the D3 to FCS move up, because that's where they should have been anyway.
Sure.
So I really think that it is a true mix of things to come. One of the top quarterbacks also this year is a G5 to G5 transfer. Carter Bradley at South Alabama moved down from Toledo. So you do see the G5 where maybe it's a better fit and a better opportunity. But, for the most part, it's going to be the classic saying, get in where you fit in, right? Where's the place that you're going to be able to make the biggest impact, get the most play time to make that name for yourself?
All right, so Bradley's one name, and that's the next thing I wanted to ask you. Give me a list of the top guys, and we don't have to go obviously 10 or 20 deep, but give me a list of the guys that you think are going to maybe have the opportunity to make the most noise this season or within their career if they're going to be here for a couple of years at least. And Bradley is he near the top of the list?
For sure. I mean, he did wonders last year, getting the Jags into double-digit wins. Obviously, it didn't end the way they wanted, getting beat in the New Orleans Bowl by Western Kentucky, but still had a solid season and is teed up to have just another phenomenal year as well. I think another guy just north of there in Southern Miss, a name that everybody should know by now after I think he's still running for touchdowns in the bowl games last year. Frank Gore Jr. at Southern Miss is just phenomenal. And having him watched last year, him just destroy the Warhawks in that season finale to get them bowl eligible. I really lose words of trying to describe just how impactful he is, and knowing that luckily we only have to deal with him one more year this year, and then he graduates to go on to bigger and better things.
Yeah.
I think at ULM, Tyrone Howe at the receiver position made huge strides last year. I think he finished with 800 yards of total receptions, and is poised to again be just a huge playmaker again this year. Darren Granger at Georgia State is another quarterback that I really like. His play is really going to dictate how successful or unsuccessful the Panthers are, and whether or not they can kind of break out of that early season slump that they've had these past few years. Beyond that, Cam Fincher at Marshall, another big name. Rashid Ali, after he missed a lot of last year from injury, what can he do this year? Getting to kind of showcase technically maybe that sophomore. Does he have that sophomore slump, or is he good to go after, sitting out and missing so much last year? So I think that those are some of the big names that are really have my attention this year.
Are there any big names coming from who knows where, transfer portal, that will be making their first start this year in the Sun Belt that we need to keep an eye on? New faces to the conference.
The new faces mostly to me to keep an eye on, because you don't know what to do.
You don't.
Is in Texas State. Malik Hornsby from Arkansas transferring in. What's he going to do? TJ Finley, who transferred from Auburn by way of LSU. What's he going to do? They have a now sophomore quarterback, CJ. I don't remember what his last name is, that they really liked in the spring. I think it was CJ Rogers. They really like what he did in the spring. So is he going to be able to compete? We jokingly said with GJ Kinney, their new head coach, you haven't decided on a quarterback. Are you just going to run a 3-quarterback set with all of them putting their hands out? And he just laughed, going, maybe. Thanks for the idea, So I think that Texas State is the huge question mark of with all the transfer portal kids they had come in, I think it was 10, 12 kids, even from Incarnate Word, again, an FCS program, but following their coach up. Are they going to be the difference makers that can finally get the Bobcats going? Or is it we need one more year to try to rebuild and get the program up?
Yeah, what do you think? And what's move on, segue to that, the new faces coaching wise. So, how many new head coaches are in the league this year?
Just two.
Just two.
One in the East, one in the West. Yeah, you have G.J. Kinney at Texas State and Tim Beck at Coastal Carolina.
And of course, those are some pretty good names to add to this conference. So that's even better. It's not because you've seen in the past, you get these guys. Sometimes you don't even know who are these guys. Maybe they turn out to be really good coaches, but you just don't know where they're coming from. But that just shows you the state of the conference when you get these types of coaches that decide to come here.
For sure. I mean, talking with Tim Beck even before Sunbelt Media Days, but he kind of reiterated it earlier in the week in New Orleans. He was at NC State, and he's like, man, you got to pay attention to what's going on in the Sun Belt because we're going to be facing these teams. We're going to be recruiting against these teams, and in some cases, we might lose out to some guys going there. So getting a guy that kind of gets it, gets the G5, gets where these teams are really starting to make a name for themselves is huge to then further that once they're actually in the league as head coaches.
Give us a couple of games, or maybe, I don't know if there's like a top 5 or top 3 of non-conference games that you're really excited about the most.
Straight out of the gate, South Alabama travels to New Orleans to take on Tulane. Tulane, the big G5 New Year's invitee last year. In addition to that, Southern Miss will actually get them again as an old rival, the battle for the bell. That was one of Tulane's losses with Southern Miss last year. So is there going to be revenge, or does Southern Miss kind of get the sweep? I think it is pretty interesting there as well.
So Tulane has 2 of them.
They got 2.
All right. So no big matchups this year of facing any top Power 5 programs that might be in the top 20.
Coastal Carolina opens up against UCLA. I think that's another interesting, because I think there's no doubt that Coastal Carolina can compete in that game, but it's a question, though, of traveling coast to coast. What does that do to them to prepare for them? Marshall, East Carolina, maybe not necessarily the P5 matchup that you want to talk about, but I think that's a really good game.
Yeah.
Texas State gets an early test there against UTSA. So those are some of the pretty good ones. Maybe a statement game. Jacksonville State goes to Coastal Carolina. We have the new Conference USA battling the Sun Belt, where they're really battling out for that premier G5. And then another intriguing matchup as well, Southern Miss going to Florida State. Where's Florida State in all this? Because if they're napping, these Golden Eagles are going to come in and try to swoop out a victory.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of these teams now. The ones you've already mentioned, teams to beat. App State. Most college fans who are not big into understanding Group of 5 teams or even the Sun Belt, they know Appalachian State. And they had to remind everybody last year, as you mentioned, in their upset against Texas A&M. But yeah, watching them and remembering that their week in and week out, the games that they were playing. I mean, it just blew your mind. You knew eventually that they just couldn't keep it up. That it's just impossible. And that's probably what caught up to them. And that's why maybe the season didn't end up the way that they would have liked. But you mentioned them as definitely one of the teams to beat. So right now, like you said, you're saying in the East, App State and Marshall, those would be the top 2 teams to beat. As far as those, you mentioned Ali from Marshall, the running back. Who are the key players on App State that we need to keep an eye on?
I think Nate Noel, the running back, is going to be a big key player for them as well. And then really kind of the TBD quarterback. I think that's going to be another indicator of how that offensive goes, is who's quarterback, because they have several in camp, and it's a matter of, is it the freshman Mason that is going to be taking over, or they got a transfer from Tulsa that could be, kind of the veteran guy that they turn to. and it's really just kind of going to be a fall camp battle to see who's going to take that over and really compete for that starting role.
Yeah, Bryce was there for a few years, wasn't he? So
He was.
That's an open spot. All right, Marshall. Anybody besides Ellie?
Like I said, quarterback Cam Fincher, I think, is another big name on the defensive side. I really like this Owen Porter kid that came to Sunbelt Media Days at the linebacker position. Plays with a lot of grit, a lot of heart, and I think that he's going to lead that defensive unit for the Thunder and Herd to really make some noise for him.
Now, Coastal, we know they've got the star quarterback, new head coach. We just talked about that. Little bit of a talent downgrade last year. Matter of fact, I think there were a lot of people who actually thought Coastal was going to struggle even more than they did. But it just shows you quarterback coaching can do. But still, it was evident in the bigger games, end of the season, bowl game, where the talent had gone. Are they going to be more competitive this year, do you believe, talent-wise?
I think offensively they will. I definitely think that the big question is on the defensive side and what can they do there, or will they be in a position that they have to literally beat their opponents by just outscoring them as opposed to really kind of battling it out on both sides of the ball.
Who's the guy to keep an eye on skill position wise? Who does Grayson McCall turn to the most?
Sam Pickney, transfer from Georgia State. He got an extra year after last year we thought was going to be a senior year, but he's back for one more, and anxious to see what he can do with this one extra year. Does he really excel, or does he kind of fall flat a little bit?
What do you think about James Madison? You said that I guess the league, what is it? The writers were the ones that voted James Madison? Coaches. So what do you think about, of course, it's year two. They showed who they were last year, especially early on in the season. Are they going to be better this year, do you think, than last year?
I don't know where that team came from last year. They came in last year in the East, picked dead last,
yeah.
I think, because no one knew what to expect. They had a D1 transfer quarterback coming in. They're this woe is us little FCS team that's getting elevated up into the G5 there. What are they going to do? Are they going to boom or are they going to bust? They definitely boomed. Now it's a question, I think, pretty much in the same boat of, okay, that's great, but you lost so much. So what can you do now? And I think that's still a huge TBD question.
It shows you how much, again, the quarterback position, like you said, especially the transfer, you're always going to watch that. And sure enough, they found a quarterback for a year, and that helped them big time. But like you said, now he's gone. All right, Georgia Southern, Clay Helton, year two. So what do you think? What kind of job do you think he did, and what kind of job do you think he's going to do there?
I think overall he's the right guy for the job. I did not expect anything out of the Eagles last year, though, because I fully expected, he said we're going to start getting away from the triple option, but it's like, okay, it's not going to happen overnight. How quickly can you start getting your offensive linemen in, get receivers, quarterback? Hal Van Trees was a 400-star quarterback last year and played over his head like there is no tomorrow, and that was the difference of why the Eagles were successful last year. But he was a one and done.
Yep.
So what can you do now, again, is the huge question of when you have to get a new quarterback. That they have a guy that came in, I forget who it is, it's another transfer quarterback.
Davis Brin.
Another one and done. So what is that going to look like? Is that going to be the stopgap until you're kind of getting these high school kids that you have coming in ready? Or is that your new operating procedure of just one and done, and hope they keep hitting?
Yeah. Well, I think you hit it. They've got to eventually get the young kids to take over, but you understand the Band-Aid approach. I think it works. Sooner or later, though, they're going to have to change the program entirely. And I can imagine Clay Helton could be there for a little bit. I don't think he's the type of coach that is going to be sought after unless he does a really good job at Georgia Southern for the next 5 years, I would guess. That's my opinion. So
yeah, I think he's there for the long haul. And like I said, last year we had no expectations of Georgia Southern. just anxious to see, is this the year where we shouldn't have had no
Yeah.
expectations for Georgia Southern?
Yeah.
Which is fine. They're headed in the right direction. We're not saying they're a lost cause or anything like that. It's just a matter of it takes time to build that program back up to our expectations, let alone what Georgia Southern has for expectations.
By the way, I like the kid Bryn. I really like what I saw out of him at Tulsa. So I think this is an excellent opportunity for him to showcase himself as the full-time starter there. But is Hood, Caleb Hood, is he their best player?
I think so. I think that is their legitimate threat that can really hold down the fort and get the Eagles moving again this upcoming season.
Sean Elliott, Georgia State. I know it was a disappointing season last year, but he's done a really good job there.
I think overall he has, but like I said, the Panthers have always been slow out of the gate, and we asked Sean Elliott about that on our show, and he just kind of smiled and said, "Yeah, we do, but if you look at it, we're having to play North Carolina, South Carolina,
Yeah.
A buzzsaw university to open up the season. We're going to start slow." So his hope is that they can kind of grind through it, get healthy, and turn that corner as quick as they can through the season, so that they're not looking at like an 0-5 start and then rattle off the wins, but maybe they can have a 2-3 start and then chip away at that deficit that they have.
All right, in the West, so you talk about South Alabama, and they had themselves a heck of a year, winning 10 games. Didn't get it done in the bowl game, but hey, you know what? Maybe this year's the year they put it all together. You mentioned Bradley at quarterback, but to be the top team in the division, they have more than just a quarterback. Give me a couple other players to keep an eye on.
Standing right beside him, because they run out of some wing tee and everything, is going to be Webb, the running back. He returns for his senior year, a great upfield runner, able to really make something out of nothing. And I think that really also makes them two-dimensional, so that you can't focus just on the passing game. You can't focus just on the running game. You really have to play defense solidly against the Jags in order to do that. And on the defensive side, Yam Banks, the safety, he's another guy that, as long as he can stay healthy, I think can even put up some decent numbers. I think he's going to be the most recent Jag that hears his name called for the NFL draft next season.
All right, we'll keep an eye on Yam Banks for sure. Troy. Yeah, Troy, with such a big season last year, winning 12 games. They won their bowl game, and they did it against a very good UTSA team. So that was really big. But they most of their winning came from the defensive side of the ball. Is that going to continue this year?
You got to hope so. But they lost the biggest part of their defense, of probably the smallest guy, of Carlton Marshall, who graduated. NCAA record holder for career tackles, but his leadership was far bigger than any play he ever made for that team. And so you got to now hope that you have guys that can try to step up into that role to keep them motivated, keep them focused defensively. They have the talent. There's zero doubt about that. It's a question of the leadership and having that extra coach on the field that can really motivate guys and hold them accountable to make the right plays.
Yeah, you mentioned Solomon, their edge rusher, and they have a couple other really good standout defenders as well. Who do you think has the best chance on Sundays in the future?
On the defensive side, I really like the defensive back, second team all conference, Del Pettis. I think that he's going to be a big playmaker there. Reminds me a lot of Leotis McKinney that they had several years ago that wound up drafted playing in the league a couple years, I think with the Giants, if that's right.
Okay.
But a big-time playmaker that can really be a difference maker in that secondary.
Yeah, Stewart and how do you pronounce it? Jubinor, linebacker? Richard Jubinor?
I think that's right.
Yeah. So those are a couple other, and also I believe T.J. Jackson. So they're loaded still. You mentioned the big loss with the leader, but they are still loaded with defenders that have received a lot of accolades, high accolades over the last few seasons. So I really like the fact that you mentioned Pettis, because he doesn't have as high accolades as some of those other guys I was mentioning. So it's exactly why it's great to have somebody like you on that really sees these guys a lot more than we do. Louisiana. So the first year, actually, yeah, they're in a situation now where their big time coach leaves. How do you think the direction of the program is now?
I think that they were a little worried whenever Billy Napier left. Billy Napier took a lot of talent off that roster as well with him to Florida,
Yep.
as well as some other guys just hitting the portal and going elsewhere overall. But I think that they saw that the promotion within the legend, the former quarterback there, Michael DeZormo, to the head coaching position was probably the right move. And I think that it showed that he was able to kind of weather the storm and keep that Cajuns team focused on the goal of knowing that it was going to be a rebuilding year. I think even if Napier stays, I still think that it was kind of a down year by their standards and a rebuilding year. Once again, though, this is another team that has a bunch of questions at quarterback. You have Woolard, but he's been hurt pretty much last year and through the spring. Then you have Chandler Fields, who had some issues there whenever he was going through the spring drills. And then you have Chris, who is the fan favorite and to me, the guy that should be the gunslinger for the Cajuns. But it's really a wide open race and one that, it's probably not going to be until their opener against Northwestern State that we see who's going to actually be the leader for the Cajuns.
And you mentioned Southern Miss quite a bit on this program, and they're coming off a 7-win season. You mentioned that, of course, that bowl game as well, the performance of Gore Jr. So it sounds like you think they're going to be better this year.
I think they're still a 7-win team. I mean, is that better? Maybe, but I think that they're a solid team. They're not the good old baseball analogy, the easy out. I think that you're going to have to fight tooth and nail for every game that you have against them in order to try to get that win. And they're going to do the same against you and probably come out ahead a little bit with Will Hall leading the charge there for the Golden Eagles.
Yeah, and that's another team that has had some really weird quarterback play the last few years. Sometimes you look at them and you're like, what are they doing at quarterback? Oh, Frank Gore's quarterback. I know what that's about, but is that's not a good thing. So they're looking for a full-time quarterback still? Looks like it.
I think they have one on the roster, but
Okay.
I don't think that they've really bumped him up. Zach Wilkie is the guy that really returns from last year and a guy that should be able to make some ground in the fall camp and win that starting job. They do have another guy that transferred in that maybe makes a little bit of push. His name's escaping me. But, they do have options. They have good options. So it's not like they're going to be hurting at quarterback. It's going to be a matter of picking the right guy to be that quarterback as opposed to just settling for somebody.
Yeah, they actually have transfers from Houston and Clemson on the roster. So we'll see who wins that job. You mentioned, of course, Arkansas State. Butch Jones. So this a big year for Butch?
No, he doesn't even count his first year as a year at Arkansas State because the cupboard was so bare, so to say. I think he went on to say he had only inherited like 5 offensive linemen total. So it's really been a struggle for him to even rebuild that one unit, let alone the rest of the team. So I don't think that there's many expectations on the Red Wolves. I do think that they're still a 4 or 5 win team. And so another down year for the Red Wolves, but they're improving and getting there.
And then let's wrap up with your team, the Warhawks, because what they have done the last couple of years is pull off some nice upsets. So even though they haven't had great seasons, at least they've had that like one game where you go, all right, hey, this is it. This is our season. Terry Bowden, what do you think about the job he's done there?
He's done a good job. I mean, he's really stopped the bleeding, so to say, of that team. I mean, I know 2020 was a crazy year that almost shouldn't count in the record books, but it was a 0-10 season. And after that, Matt Viator left or got told to go. So he came in 21 really having to kind of stop the bleeding and get things stable for the Warhawks, both on the field, off the field. athletically, academically, pretty much on every aspect of that program. And he's still able to get 4 wins and really should have had 6 even his first year. And so he's right there at the cusp, needs that additional playmaker or two. I think Franklin could probably be one of those playmakers that really makes a difference. But offensively, that offensive line is going to have to show up with a new quarterback, new running backs. Everyone's going to be targeting Tyrell Howe, so we need another receiver to step up and really be that playmaker as well. The defense is going to be stout. Defensive coordinator Vic Cohen has had a pretty good defense the past few years. This year, he has a lot of good talent and another year of seasoning under his belt of that defense that they should be pretty good.
So you think there's a possibility of a bowl this season then?
I would not go that far.
Okay.
But I would never look. So somebody asked me at media today, so what do you think of the Warhawks? And I said, it would be the most ULM thing if they go 12-0. And they're like, look at me like, really? I mean, y'all have Ole Miss, y'all have Texas A&M on the schedule. I was like, yeah. I said, but it's also the most ULM thing if they go 0-12. And they're like, even Lamar? And I was like, even Lamar. I said, and anything in between would not surprise me. So, having 6 wins, 7 wins, sure, I see that. Ofer, I see that too. It's really just going to be a matter of that offensive line. And then also having that intangible skill of luck, getting that ball that bounces your way as opposed to going the other way. And sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't.
Does the team have like a one guy on either side of the ball that's our guy, that's our player of the team?
Hal, without a doubt. Hal, without a doubt.
He's got good size too. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the lone preseason all-conference selection, and he's definitely the ride or die.
All right, so have you made your prediction yet, and who you think is actually going to win it all?
I unfortunately or fortunately made the prediction of the Jags.
Okay,
they're my ride or die. Love the governor, Kane Womack. But it's going to hurt me if they don't succeed because they definitely have all the pieces in place to make that run and to make that trip to hoist the trophy.
And give us the sleeper of the conference, the sleeper of the year.
I think the sleeper of the year, honestly, is Texas State. Not really knowing what they have or what they're going to be like. They're much like ULM, right? They could be an Ofer. They could be, an 8 or 9 win team. And I think until we kind of get into like that Jackson State game in week 3, we're not really going to know what this team is like or how good they really are.
And if Grayson McCall, let's get Grayson McCall out of the picture. If he's out of the picture for whatever reason, or you have to do player of the year 1B, give me a player of the year not named Grayson McCall.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what Rashid Ali does out of Marshall. So I think that'll be a big one to see. Cam Fancher there at Marshall as well. I think it's another big pick that I have. Frank Gore Jr. You can never pick against him.
That is true. And is there a coach right now in the conference that you think could be the next Billy Napier?
The next guy I would say to bail out and go on to bigger, better things. It would surprise me, honestly, if Charlie Huff, former Alabama assistant, decent tenure there at the Marshall Thunder and Herd, if he wasn't looked at for maybe that smaller P5 type of job.
Dusty, I really appreciate you getting us up to speed on the Sun Belt. And before I let you go, just to let everybody know, how often do you do the podcast?
We are weekly, mostly, except for the summer where, there gets the July content. You can only talk about so many times of, I heard the rumor that, Grayson McCall drinks protein shakes 3 times a day. Yeah. So we do kind of back off and do every other week over the summer. But during the week, one show, toyed around with maybe doing a recap and then a preview show. So it might be 2 this upcoming year. But we always have a lot of good fun. A lot of interactions there on Twitter, Funbelt PC. DM's always open, so feel free to drop us a line. We love hearing from fans. We love trying to get them included in the show as much as possible. Me personally, Warhawk_report is mine. for all the information on ULM Warhawks. A-State Fan Rules is Jeremy's with Howraiser, and Shane's is Shane Metlin _DNR for Daily News Record or Do Not Resuscitate. We don't know which one it is. And he'll give you all the inside scoop there for James Madison as well.
Is this both video and audio?
We're audio only.
Audio only. You're going
we
to
all
change
have
that soon?
We have the face for audio, but yeah, we feel compelled that we got to do some videos. So maybe we'll do it and wear helmets or masks or, something like that. So at least we keep that viewership up.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, I appreciate it then, Dusty, and I look forward to also speaking with either you, Shane, Jeremy, throughout the season, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about, as always, in the Sun Belt Conference. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.